All right, welcome everyone. Today I have Dr. Lisa Peterson, who is an assistant professor and training director for the school psychology doctoral program at New Mexico State University. She is also the president of the New Mexico Association of School Psychologists. As a former school psychologist and elementary school teacher, her research is focused on supporting the mental health needs of underserved groups in schools, as well as training and professional issues that will increase the number of underrepresented school psychologists. She loves travel, photography, and her senior rescue dog, who has the greatest name in the world, Jenny.
Doesn't.
I am so honored to have you here, Dr. Peterson. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we like to kick off with a really important question, which is, what is your favorite TV show you're watching right now?
So I'm an escapist. Our work is hard, so I do the easiest TV basically possible. So right now it's Survivor.
I love it.
I'm all reality TV junk. I know the people that do like, oh, I do the drama, the crime. Nope. Give me easy, fun, relax, get away from the world. So it is TV season, Survivor, Amazing Race, all that. And that is what I'm doing right now.
I love all those shows. We watch them as well. I am curious because I noticed this season the Survivor episodes are longer than usual, and
Yes.
there's a lot more than focus on the drama
Yes.
between the contestants instead of the games. Like, I love the games part of it. So I'm curious, do you like the extra time with the drama, or is that like I'm frustrated with it? What are your thoughts?
Well, last season they did that too, and I think because of strikes and everything, they were extending things out. So I didn't mind it as much in the fall. This season is just chaos, and I have a group of people I actually do fantasy teams with, and
Nice.
God help me, I had Bonnie on my team. And I've been waiting for the last 3 weeks for like, please just get this over with. I don't care that like I will not put any money. Please make this end. So that's where we are. I saw a post from my friends this morning. He's like, here's the payout based on who are sitting for money. So everybody have fun with my money.
I love
Because
that.
so it kind of depends if it's good drama, it's good. I like the getting to know people.
Okay.
I'm kind of space, but if it's just drama for the sake of like how this has started, then no. We
Okay.
can move on. But I also watch after class in spring. So I feel like I'm kind of rushing anyway.
Yeah.
It's kind of my challenge because I do teach on Wednesdays in spring. So not good timing, but in our classes, because we're school psychology, our classes are after school. So
Right.
I
Right.
get home like right in the middle of it.
Okay. Well, in one sentence, how would your colleagues have described you when you were working as a school psychologist?
I think flexibility is always what comes to my mind, but I think just that willingness to do what needs to be done. And I think that translates to my work in the schools, and then everything I do is that even back when I was a teacher, it was like there's this kid, this situation, who's willing to step up.
Mhm.
And I've always been the one like, yeah, sure, we'll make this work. And I think as a school psychologist, that's what you have to be is, you walk in that building and you never know day to day what life is going to be like. So I've always been okay with that. I've always been okay, I'm here. I would love this to be the plan, but I know that's not how things may work. So I'm here. What do you need? And especially, I always remember I tell my students this, like, if I walk in the building and I hear Dr. Peterson's here, okay, something happened and you got to roll with it. So I think that flexibility and just being willing to change things up.
Yeah.
I think that was something that was always valued in my work I did in the schools and said, and now as faculty as well. I'm like, okay, we'll make this happen.
Well, I'm curious because you are faculty now, and so you get this like different viewpoint to be able to help support these people coming into the
Yeah.
field. I know a lot of times, because I've taught in school psych programs as well, a lot of times we focus on the content knowledge, right? We need to teach you about autism and learning disabilities and
Yep.
counseling skills, but some of these other kind of soft skills like
Yep.
flexibility, kind of curious, how do you share that kind of information so that people are ready? Because that's
Yeah.
an important part of our job.
Yeah, it really is. And one thing that I'm grateful for is I teach practicum.
Okay.
So, and that was something when I came on board, I really wanted, and it just happened to be the person who had taught practicum was leaving, which was not good because I feel like my program, like a lot of programs, were always trying to get more faculty and build up. So, but when I see, there goes the repetition piece. I'm like, edit. I remember being on the phone with the department head, who was like, "Oh, you're going to come. What do you want to teach?" And they're like, "Well, this is what's going to be open." I'm like, "Oh, please give me practicum." Because my practicum classes are, here's what you need to do to get out there. I do a couple foundational classes, not many. I do our diagnosis, like our DSM stuff. And I'm not going to teach them, here's a checklist of depression of ADHD. I'm like, here's what this is going to look like. Here's what you're going to do. Here's what's going to trip you up. And so practicum, I approach it the same way. And my students know this, especially my spring class. When I have my EDS students who are going to be on internship next year, I said, this is my last chance to brain dump, as I tell them. I said, every little thing that you may not have thought about or may not have popped up somewhere, I want you to know. So we had conversations this week about my official topic after our supervision piece was risk assessment, which is huge.
Yeah.
Absolutely huge, about how, you're with a kid in whatever situation and there's an outcry, there's something, what do we do? So that was kind of my driving thing, but ended up going into a mandated reporting conversation, which they had wanted to have anyway. So what do you do? How do you report? What is it? Why do you report? What does it mean if you don't have supportive parents? And all of these pieces. So what if this kid needs something and parents aren't doing it? So those are those little things that don't really pop up anywhere in particular. But I squeeze them in. So if you look at the schedule for next week, I'm constantly shifting in that class because of other things that will come up. And I always have so much, especially because I usually had them fall spring. I actually lost my fall class this year because of just scheduling and things. I only get them in spring. So I'm like, I hadn't talked to you about this before and this and this. So poor things. They get my soapboxes, which is good. And the students respond, whatever that looks like. And I say, okay, like next week, we're going to talk about MDRs. They've heard about those things. They're like, but that doesn't fit me. So we're doing that. And they get my students, since I first got here, appreciate that I know what I'm talking about. That I'm not just telling the best practices theory. Like I can tell you all day, here's step by step how to do an evaluation. Here's your theoretical orientation for counseling. Here's the models for consultation. And I've been in education for a long time. Like I said, I was a teacher first. So I know that like, this is not how this is going to go down. So I want them to know that. I want them to know this is going to be messy.
Yeah.
And you have to be okay with that. And ultimately, whatever this is that you're about your kid, about the student in front of you and the advocacy, and you're going to step on toes.
Right.
But that's okay, because you're the person who is going to hopefully cut through some of that noise of team meetings and complaints and everything and say, full stop, here's what this kid needs. So I embed that in wherever I can.
That's great.
And they want that. My students crave that because they know this job is not easy.
Right. And this job is not just a checklist or just the theory. It is all that practicality of how do you actually implement all of these things and get through the day with some flexibility. Right.
Yep.
Well, I'm curious, how long have you been part of the field of school psychology? Because like you mentioned, I know you were a teacher first.
Yeah.
And at what point in your journey did you become involved in your state association?
So I've been doing this for a while. So like I said, I was a teacher for 6 years, went back to school, needed these new tools in my toolkit, and full classroom teaching was not my thing. I love the kids, but it's not my thing. So stumbled into school psychology, as a lot of us do. Went to school, just to get my PhD. Why not go to school? Let's just do the whole thing. basically. And then I was out in the schools for 7 years,
Okay.
out in Dallas. So very high needs, low SES, kind of just very, and I actually was doing kind of a illustrational school psych role where I was doing more gen ed work. I
Okay.
wasn't testing, I was mental health,
Oh, wow.
which is why my research really has become mental health focused because of the work I did. I walked in the building, what do you need person?
Hmm.
I was the counselors, the teachers, the administrators are like, we don't know what to do with this kid. This is beyond what we know. What can you do for us? A lot of peripheral stuff. So I did that for 7 years in Texas. And I wasn't involved in the state leadership there. And a couple of reasons. It is a much bigger association.
Yes.
So you not that you can't get in, but kind of leveraging that. And I also knew that eventually I wanted to move to faculty. So I didn't want to overcommit to something and then move.
Right.
So I did move. And I ended up getting into state leadership really fast. So the difference between like a big state like Texas, like California versus state like New Mexico is basically if you're willing to do anything, you will do it.
Okay.
So my foray into state leadership was we had our annual conference that October. So I've been here for what, 4 months? Three. I think 3.5 months at that point. It's been crazy. And so they're looking for like new like area reps. So we have 3 different kind of area regional kind of reps. And so my part of the state, Southern New Mexico, besides our at the time president, there were me and there was a group from one school district. We were the only people from this part of the state that were there. And so it's business meeting time, and it's like, who would like to be the rep for Southern New Mexico? And I'm sitting with these 4 5 school psychologists from this local district, and they're like, what?
Not
And I
me.
said, I can do it. And they're like, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. So literally, like within like 3 months of me moving to Mexico, I was on the board.
Wow.
And then, go on to like a year plus later, everything shifts because of COVID. And so we had no president-elect. We didn't have one at that time. And our current president, who was also one of our faculty members, I said, if you need me to do it, I can do it, knowing there'll be a couple of years for me to still learn. I'm still learning New Mexico.
Hmm.
And so but I'm willing to slip in so you can teach me. And so I did. I slid into president-elect, and then about 9, 10 months later, my president said, personally, I cannot keep up with president. You're now in charge.
Wow.
So I had been in New Mexico for like 2.5 years, maybe, when I was started running things here,
Isn't that crazy?
which is not like the normal path, but it's going back to that stepping up piece. And I wasn't thrilled because I wasn't think I was ready for it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like are you ready for this? It was like, you need to do this. So, and I've been doing it ever since. I don't have a president-elect. So we're back to that, finding who is going to be up. So I have people that I'm trying to prep for it. So maybe in the next time I'll be ready for it. And so it's so crazy. And I talk to other small state people, and I'm not the only one that has a story like you slide into this really fast because there aren't that many people to do this work, especially a smaller state. We have one of the worst ratios in the country. So our ratio, my number is an estimate. What you see on the NAS website, where like there's like there's like a graph of like states and like the ratios, we are off the charts.
Wow.
We are not there. I don't think our number is that bad, but we have, and I've thrown this number to other state leaders and they look at me like I'm crazy. We have maybe at most 150 school psychologists working in the state right now. At most, based on like who I know is licensed and who's actually practicing.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's it. So between that pool, who has the time to do leadership and is faculty, I can get an email out. I did that yesterday. I took like 15 minutes. to get a membership email, and I'm learning how to do Canva to get advertisements out. So that's my story is not necessarily what I would recommend, but it's my story.
Excellent, excellent. Well, as a state association president, what are some of your key initiatives? Like, what are you passionate about your state association working on right now?
So we, as I've kind of alluded, our state association, during COVID, we weren't not, we kind of got stagnant.
Yeah.
It was our state association was the people have been doing it for a long time were burning out. So COVID and us, a new leadership team, almost all my leadership team is new within the last few years. So we've been rebuilt. And so what my goals are right now, I really have two goals, is how, as we rebuild, basically. I mean, the first one is that shortage. And how do we connect people? Because there aren't that many of us. And New Mexico is largely rural.
Okay.
So New Mexico has a couple, you being from California, you'll laugh at me, big cities.
Yeah.
Not that I'm in a big city, but I live in the second biggest city in New Mexico, and we have 100,000 people. That's how small we are. So we have Albuquerque, and attached to that Santa Fe and a couple suburbs. So like almost half the population of Mexico is right there. We're here. Everything else is rural.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to do is building up our field and connect people. So and that's been a learning curve, I think, a lot of states coming out of COVID, and what works as far as in-person versus virtual. I think we're still learning from that. We've been fortunate that we haven't lost too much money. I know other states have. So we're navigating, because I don't want to lose the fully in person, because that is such a connection piece, but also some of my school sites can't get. So we've been doing more virtual options. I have a monthly kind of just casual lunchtime networking session that has a slow but loyal group.
Nice.
And those are all people that don't have other people, or they may have one or two other people. So a lot of this, that's kind of to support my members and my school psychologists, is just how do we connect? Because we do have these couple districts that have, more school psychs, like our district here, because we have the training program here. We are the only training program. So like our local districts, our ratios look really good. Anywhere else in the state, darn enough. So how do I build that up? And then kind of related to that in a way is the advocacy piece.
Yeah.
How do we advocate to make it easier for people to get their license? One major issue that this association's been fighting since way before I got here is reciprocity.
Mm-hmm.
So I came here with 7 years of experience, and we have here our school psychologists. They're on the same system that like teachers, other school staff are, whereas there's like a level system.
Right.
And so like a level 1 is like your entry level, like I need to be supervised, et cetera. Level 2 is independent. Level 3 is I can supervise. Level 3 doesn't really happen a lot in other states, like coming from Texas. Like if you have the experience, you can supervise. Here, there's actually another level.
Okay.
So, but with the lack of reciprocity here, doesn't matter where you come from, what your experience is, you start at level 1. So I came here and applied, and here's my resume. Here's what I've done. I supervised practicum, internship, all this stuff. They started me at the bottom. And I said, this is my experience, might remind you that. And they just sent me the rules again. And I didn't want to take supervision away from my students, so I just didn't practice.
Mm-hmm.
I've done a little bit of practice, and now they bumped me up just by over time. I bumped up to level 2, but that's the kind of things that keeps people out of our field.
Yeah.
Because we do have a lot of like, majority of my board isn't native New Mexico. They are people who relocated due to spouse jobs, people coming home, like my secretary, his wife was from here. They met in school in New York. So they came back here. So people like that are starting, over. So that is a big advocacy piece here that we need to pick back up. And just how do we get the word out about what we do? How do we make sure we're part of the conversation? Yeah. Because there are so few of us, we're not often part of conversations. So there was a big court case that happened, I think 2018, so before I came here, about the state right to an education and basically how New Mexico wasn't meeting the needs of our native students and our bilingual students. And so there's this lovely court ruling of here's what we need to do: academics, mental health, all these areas where we need to make things equitable in our state. We're not listed.
Oh, wow.
Counselors, social workers, nurses are mentioned. We are not mentioned.
Interesting.
So part of my advocacy piece is just getting us at the table so that people know we're here. We've done this great work. So that's something that I'm working on and we're trying for us is because so many of us on our board aren't from the state, is making sure we have connections.
Yeah.
Who are our local legislators who I did Public Policy Institute in NAS last year. And so I have really great connections at the federal level, which is wonderful. Like I have a senator whose staff regularly contacts us about what's going on, which is incredible. But now we're missing the state level.
Yeah.
Now I've got to bring that down. Who are these people when we talk about policy? Because like many states, our big legislative session is every other year. So ours will be next year. This year was an off year. This year was a 60-day, let's just knock some key things out. There were some educational things. Nothing really went very far. I followed it, and except for like a high school graduation requirement, nothing really happened. The next year's going to be the 90 days. That's going to be the big change. And we have state leadership that is trying to build up education. New Mexico is known for being very low in education. Okay. Which is a systemic issue. It's poverty, it's substance use, it's just a lot of things. I think our schools are doing some really good work. But we have a lot of challenges. So but I need to get us in the conversation. And that to me, that is my biggest, beyond like connecting us, and I think teaching my members as well, taking all those things that I've learned. And we did do a piece at our state conference about some advocacy tools. We did do some piece there, but I need to build on that because we are not going to be part of these conversations if people don't know we're there. Right. So that is I think above all, I think about next year as we start already thinking about, what's going to come out next school year. We have to be prepared. We can't be blindsided by, oh my gosh, they're already built out there. Right. I want people to know who we are. So like when they are developing things that they said, oh, like we're talking about child youth mental health because that's such a critical issue. Like you got these amazing people who are trained to do this work. Please talk to us. So that's what I'm working.
That's important work. Do you have a particular accomplishment in your role as president that you're most proud of right now?
My accomplishment right now is just the fact that I got things going. And I know that seems small. No. But the fact that we were having conferences during COVID. We were having virtual ones. They were small, but, getting our conference back going, getting these networking sessions, these small things. We have t-shirts finally. And I was going to wear mine for this, and I can't figure out where I put it. We have t-shirts finally. I don't know when the last time was. Those are little things, but it's the visibility piece. Yeah. And what are those potential things? Like we've had meetings with NAS, with ATS, the Assistant to States, about rebuilding. And I talked to so many state leaders, the small states and the big states. So like I said, I talked to Melissa, and she's like, yes. I would love when we were at NAS last month. She was me and my delegate, one of my other people that came. She was like, I would love to invite all of you to look at our network street. You can see how we do things. And I'm like, that would be amazing. Also, I know you work differently. Right. But I will always come to San Diego if I have a way to. Like if you want me to come to San Diego, I will go. So I feel like so much of my board has been the strategizing. Like when we met with ATS and they said, you have a strategic plan. Do you have these things? I didn't know the answer. I went to my past president. I said, what do we have? And there was something that was started in 2018 with there's no like, okay, we created something. What do we do with it? So I feel like everything that I'm doing right now is incremental, but that's what I have to do. So we can't be like this. We're doing all these things and talking to other states. I can't, like we're doing, like, I would like to be in some of these places in like 5 years.
Yeah.
That is where I am. Is like right now we've got these regular sessions going. We have a plan for advocacy. We're starting to reach out to people. So next year that'll be a big push. So and then we go, okay, beyond that. So like my goal for advocacy, like we're not going to be creating, bills, right? We're not at that point where other states are. I know there are states that have actually helped draft bills. We may not be there next year, but as long as we are a part of conversations, then I'll be good. And then next year, maybe we'll help write something. So I have to think that way long term.
Of course.
Here's what I can do right now, because we are a small board and everybody is busy. Everybody on my board besides me is a practicing school psychologist. Like right now, we're getting stuff done when we get stuff done.
Of course, it's that point of the year, right? Where we're all just trying to figure out how to get through the end.
I know you're busy, but also I'm busy because it's second half of my semester and I'm trying to get students graduated. So, so that's kind of how I try to think. So I think my biggest accomplishment right now, and honestly, it's that I have momentum.
That is incredible.
It is, and I have a board who, everybody has their different amount of time they can commit. But I have people, and I have my eye on other people who have been showing up to things.
Yeah.
I think so. We do as readers, like we start looking for those people. Like every time I offer something online, you're there. So I need to find something for you. And so my goal is just really keep that momentum up so that we don't any year say, like, honestly, like this year, there were like, in other states, more like the fall, I feel like looks so good.
Yes.
And then spring, it's like, we're trying.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, when you reflect back to when you were a first-year school psychologist, what advice would you give to someone who's newer in the field, kind of finishing up their first year right now?
My advice, I think, is to just don't feel like you're alone. And this is something I tell my students too, that you don't always, people feel like, oh, I only school in my school or whatever. There's always this feeling that like we're not part of a team, we're not part of something. And I want new school psychologists, whether it's my interns, people newly graduated, so that you don't have to be alone. And you don't feel afraid to find people and reach out to people. Now, I came from working in a huge district and I had my own schools, but we were large. But I tell my students that I knew who my go-tos were. Like, I'm not a great behavior person, but I knew who my BCBA was.
Right.
And when I would get a tough case, I would go to her and I would say, I have this kinder, because they're always kinders. And like, I'm putting stuff in place. School's not respected. BCBs have another way of doing things and wording things that, like, it's amazing. Like, they're like, oh, like, that's what I said, but she said it differently. But there's something about the approach and the breakdown that is really awesome. So that was a privilege I had in a big district, and I know that. But even if you go rural, if you're with a small group, who can you reach out to? Because I feel like that's the quickest way to burnout is feel like I'm overwhelmed. I don't know who to turn.
Yeah. And
that's why state associations can help, places that have regional associations. We have like Dallas, Fort Worth has its own association. I was an officer in that one for a bit. So say I didn't do nothing state. Technically, I did the DFW group.
Yeah.
For a bit. And we were also kind of like where the group is here. We're like, there was a small small group of leadership, but we were able to put some things out there. But I feel like we go into this feel like, oh, I had this degree, I had this education, I should know everything. You will never know everything.
Absolutely
I
not.
I I watch now. I've been out of the schools for almost 5 years, which to me is kind of blows my mind. I've done a little contract work here and there. I'm trying to get back into it. When I have space, I'll at least do something. I
Yeah.
try to keep I try to keep in there, but the landscape of the schools has, especially post COVID, has been different. The child student mental health needs are so different. The academic needs. This job is always changing.
Yeah.
So when I've been in education for over 20 years, and what I would have seen is behavior homes and challenging in the early 2000s
Hmm.
versus now there's so many things that would have been a blip on a radar, now compared to like, oh, like this one, like, I mean, a couple of them, yes, but some things I'm like, yeah, that would have been lower priority now because there's so many pressing issues.
Yeah.
So always learn, always ask for help. Find your support. I know some of my grads, their cohorts stay close. My whole cohort has largely stayed in touch.
Hmm.
So find those people who you can reach out to, because you will drown in this if you feel like you have to know everything and do
Yeah.
everything. So whoever that means, I know for me, a lot of my stuff wasn't necessarily the other school psychologists either, but my counselors,
Hmm.
my sped teachers. So always look at your job not as like, I'm this little school psychologist that is jumping around from a couple of different schools and doing my little thing. We're team players,
Right.
right? I mean, that's essentially who we are. We are team players. And so leverage that.
Hmm.
And don't be anxious like, oh, I've got to have this job. You will never have this job figured out. So the sooner you have, here's my people who I can go to and can support me, that I think the better you are long term.
Yeah. I had a newer school psych ask me once in a training, and she said, how many years does it take for me to really feel like I know everything? And I said, well, I've been in it for over 20 years. I'm waiting for that day. I was like, Erin, we're never, there's new things all the time to know about. And just kind of piggybacking on this piece, making sure that we have other people to work with. There's definitely times that the school psychologist is seen as a leader, right?
Absolutely.
We do have a lot of knowledge. And I think it's an important thing to remember. We do have a very specific set of skills and set
Yeah,
of
we do.
knowledge that is very unique for our team. So a
Yeah.
lot of times we are looked to as leaders.
Yes.
It's the reason why people come to us and ask us all the millions of
Yes.
questions, right? But I know, again, going back to what we talked about earlier about flexibility being a soft skill, a lot of times our university programs aren't really gearing us up for these leadership roles, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, do you have any advice for people who maybe are a little uncomfortable in this leadership role to feel a little bit more
Yeah.
confident?
I know it's uncomfortable to put yourself out there. Absolutely. I understand that. And find my advice, and I know a lot of us give this similar advice, is like find those little things.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not comfortable, like me 2.5 months into moving into New Mexico, saying, I'll be on the board. Why not? That's fine. But I'm always looking for anybody who is willing to do anything. Like, could you help me, create this one idea? Or, I have somebody who was on the board for a year. She realized she couldn't do a full commitment. We figured out she's really good at social events.
Mm.
So I told her, I said, you can step off the board. That's fine. You tried it for a year. It didn't really work for you. However, every time we meet in person, I want you to plan our social event. And she's like, yes, I will be there.
I love that.
But that's what she did. So like when we had our national, our fall conference, she figured out where our social event was going to be that Saturday night and make sure we had a good space for that. So I'm always impressed with my students who do put themselves out there, because I do have some that are already doing leadership
That's great.
and they don't even tell me they're doing it. I had a leader at the national level that was looking for a student, and she sent me this message. She's like, I just talked to the student of yours. I'm like, you did? So, but I have this, but I understand that not everybody's going to be in that position.
Yeah.
So think about where you are comfortable and maybe where you can contribute. So if you're like, I'm like, I can help plan a little happy hour, do that. Or like behind the scenes, a lot of people are more comfortable behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So I can help with the little pieces of a newsletter. I'm actually trying to get a newsletter revived. I have still found anybody to take it on yet. I'm trying to find ways to break it down even further
Yeah.
because clearly when I say let's revise newsletter, that's kind of that's overwhelming. So I'm trying to break it down of like an hour commitment.
Right.
Like if you can do this 5 hours a month, an hour a week, maybe an hour a week's a lot. So break it down. What are you able to do? So I know for my 4 ways into leadership, I started off actually with NAS first, which is maybe I didn't ask for state.
Right.
But it was also a smaller committee. It was something I was comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
It was an area, it was a group that I've now led in the time since then, but it was with an interest group, the one that works for bilingual school psychology. So they had a call out, and I said, well, I would like to do something. I don't know what I can do because I was working in the schools, but I'll throw my name out there and my work in APA. I've always done a little something for APA too, and that was I threw myself out there. You have to be okay with taking a chance.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be where I am and doing what I do because people see me and they think, oh, you do these things. I'm like, how'd you do that? I'm like, I just decided to see if like somebody would look in. That's so many things that I've done in my life has been, why not? They'll probably say no, but why not? And occasionally somebody says yes.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to that. But if you're not, what are you comfortable with? So even if like there hasn't been an express call like a state leadership stuff, like even if like I as a state president hasn't said, oh, we need to help for this, and like, is there something like I saw you guys selling shirts now? Like I have an idea for like a shirt for next year. You know, don't be afraid. Just throw an idea. If you don't see maybe where you like that's a big jump,
Yeah.
Be willing to do that. So that's I think for students, and I think honestly the fact that I'm a leader has motivated my students.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's been a really something that I didn't think about. I just do what I do. Right. So much of what we do, just like I just do what I do.
Right.
But the fact that I have two students who have gotten a little more involved at the national level already. I have a student who got one of the minority fellowships this year. He got his face like plastered up, at the opening session at NAS, which was amazing. But those are, and I give him all the credit in the world for what he's doing. But I think the fact that I'm a model, I think has helped my students saying, oh, well, Dr. Peterson's doing this. What could I do? Like our presence at NAS since I got here has shot up. And that's not anything I intentionally did.
Right.
It is I'm going here. Who would like to present something? Since NAS came back to Boston, we've averaged at least 15 students going to NAS every year.
That's great.
Which is I remember Boston, they're like, you have that many students coming from New Mexico? I said, yeah, they want to go. And my students have figured out the advantages of going. They're finding internships, other opportunities. So I think and maybe that's kind of the takeaway from this is also if you're not sure, think about somebody who does do something in leadership and just reach out.
Yeah.
So if my students are doing things without talking to me, which I totally fine with. But if somebody came up to me and said, I know you do stuff, how did that get started? Or like, I'm just a student, or I'm just gonna be brand new girl, like state letter now. There's a million things you can do
Right.
to get out there. So I think if somebody is uncomfortable, they don't know where to start. If you know somebody who does something, ask them for advice, and maybe they can connect you to somebody who is doing something where maybe they could use a little help.
Right. Right. Well, and I love this piece that you've kind of been this theme of just just throw yourself out there a little bit, right? We don't have to go from not participating at all to becoming president, right? Or president-elect.
Yep.
There are these different opportunities. And I think for most leaders, I think about how I got to become a state association president, all those little steps that were involved with that. It starts with someone asking you a question, would you be willing to help out with a little bit? And I remember even my local group, I had a position and I was like, what am I supposed to be doing? Like, how am I supposed to be doing this? And they were like, go contact our state association office because I think they might be able to help you. Well, that was the beginning. That was forever ago. And I was very early on in my career. And it just starts with these little things to be able to help out and advocate for this amazing
Yeah.
field that all of us are in.
Yep.
Is there anything else that you would suggest or any other advice in regards to managing? Like you've already kind of shared a couple of tips of just like there's, these little moments in between where all of a sudden I find time to do this email or follow
Yes.
up and realizing that the fall I might have some more time. So I might focus a little bit more time in the fall and the spring just acknowledge the spring is rough and we don't spend as much time doing things. Is there
Yeah.
anything else you wanted to add there about kind of managing your time and making all this work?
Yeah. I think acknowledging on my end that it's a balance and it's not easy for everybody. It is me and the dog who is now, I, she's like, why are you Zooming today? I know. I'll take care of her in a minute. She's fine. I have to acknowledge that she exists.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, Miss Jenny. Um, my Jenny has been with me since grad school. So
That's incredible.
15 years in May, I've been with her. She's 16 and she's fabulous. So, but I think it's about like what makes sense for you and your role. So I
Mhm.
know like getting this t-shirt launch, which took longer because people got busy,
Yeah.
but what my secretary webmaster I just need him to make sure things were live, and he, he has other obligations, and so um he found a time in the evening just to knock stuff out. So do what works for you, I think is kind of the key. Like for me, I can, because of my role, I can send an email on a Friday morning, whereas other people might be testing or in meetings and
Right.
other things. So I was able to do all this stuff Friday because a lot of people are on spring break next week. So I wanted to get that done. So, but acknowledging that, okay, like that's something I can do. I remember when I started APA, I was on an early career committee, and I remember like finding an empty space, an extra classroom, and like between kids, like,
Hmm.
okay, I can set aside this little time for a meeting. And like our board meetings, we always do after school. We have that flexibility, but what makes sense for you? Is it something you can do on a lunch break? But I don't want to take lunch away from people. I know a lot of us do stuff on weekends.
Yeah.
But I think everybody has to figure out what makes sense for them to balance this. Being faculty has made this a lot easier. I could not do all the leadership I do in the same way
Hmm.
if I wasn't in a faculty role. If I was still doing my regular thing, I'd probably be doing a lot of this on the weekends.
Yeah.
And I'm already thinking ahead to this coming year. And I'm going up for tenure next year. Fingers crossed. And I'm grow all this, which means I'm going to be relying on our leaders.
Yeah.
And that's a conversation I'm probably going to have with them at our summer retreat. Is I know I've been doing a lot of heavy lifting. This might have look different next year
Yeah.
because I need to keep my job. So, and I don't think they're going to get rid of me. But I think it's just what makes sense for you and your work. I know there are people who, you know, I have young kids, they're napping. I can jump in and do something right now. Like my treasurer is also one of my students. Talk about it. I neglect students in the state. One of my treasurer is one of my.
That's great.
But she's tied to New Mexico. She's staying here. She wanted to do that. She's PhD level, so she's got some time. But I know she's got her kid's in first grade. I don't know how that happened. I've known her daughter since she was like, so I think she like kid is doing something. She's a nap. She's doing something. But I also respect balance. And I think that's something I don't want to sound like, oh, anytime you have a break, you need to be doing state or doing leadership, because I never want anybody to not have a balance. And we, in our program with my students, I talked to them, especially this semester with the new balancing practicum with everything. I said, you have a life. What are you doing for self-care? What are these things? So I think there's no magic, like here's how you make all this work.
Right.
I think it's so much about what are you able to give. And I think honestly, I think once you start getting involved, I think you see the value. And I think you kind of figure those things out. Like when I first started my leadership 8-9 years ago, and I was like, this is fun. And now like I go to NASP and I'm tied to multiple things. So I get to hang out with this person. And it's become such a part of who I am.
Yeah.
That I'm not just a trainer. I'm not just a school psychologist. But I tell my students like NASP for me is a social event. And I'm supposed to have been doing this for a while. But the more I do, the more I'm like, I love this. I know how this fits for me. And I also know what works for me.
Yeah.
And I think it's also that like I'm never gonna be a treasurer. I tell my board, I said, whatever you're gonna do for fundraising, any of that, I said, I'm not touching that.
You got to know yourself. You got to know your strengths. Definitely.
You absolutely, I think in issue leadership, you absolutely have to know your strengths and what makes sense for your path.
Right.
And not just, the short term, but the future. So like I was saying before that, always think about long term. So maybe I do things small now, and maybe in a couple of years, things change. And then I've got my position to where like I will be noticed for something.
Right.
Because we as leaders, we're, like we said before, we're looking. I have people in mind who, when we need another student rep next year, I know who my leaders are coming up, who know my state, especially want to stay in my state because we do get out of state students. Right. So like who has a foundation in New Mexico who I think will want to work in New Mexico and serve New Mexico. And how do I build them?
That's great.
So I'm just thinking about those pieces of, okay, I see you're showing up to this thing now. Have a conversation. Where does that person fit? So it's not just about I put myself out there for anything, but what makes sense for me and where do I feel like my strengths are? And I think people should always chat with their leader. Talk to somebody. Like I kind of want to do this. I'm not sure. And the leaders, we can help people navigate what this might look like for them.
Exactly. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to share or promote about your state association?
It's a good question. Right now we're doing our networking every month, which is kind of our big spring, keeping people on track, which has been super fun. And then we're going to do some big planning coming this summer for the advocacy piece. So I'm always looking in my leadership level for what's working for other states, what's working for other people, especially the states with shortages and these small states.
Right.
What is working? So we're really just, my goal as a state association right now is we've got 2 months left of this school year. Right. Making sure people have a network, have people to support them as they get through this last run of evaluations. New Mexico had a big policy change about how we deal with parents' requests, which has been not as bad as we thought it was going to be, but we've been supporting each other on how any changes and what does that look like to our numbers, which are already not great. Yeah. But that's what we're doing is I'm trying to make sure we really have any supports we can, even if they're informal. Yeah. To help people get through the year. And then what do people want? I'm always reaching out. What do you want from us as a state association too? So that'll be as we plan for in the summer. It's like, what do New Mexico school psychologists need? Yeah. Well, we will definitely make sure to include in the show notes
contact information and your website. So anyone listening from New Mexico who maybe isn't already part of your informal
Yeah.
networking or maybe interested, maybe we've inspired some people to maybe just raise their hand and participate a
Yeah.
bit, that they know how to get a hold of you.
Yeah.
Well,
And we get a lot of people. So we get a lot of people who relocate for us for New
yeah.
Mexico too. So maybe there's somebody who thinks eventually down the line, maybe they're in like, so my board is from California or New York, other places, but they land in New Mexico. So we're not a place that has a lot of native New Mexicans who are doing this work, which is part of the having one training program issue.
Right.
So, and being 20 miles from Texas, those people to Texas. So yeah, anybody who would love to support us in New Mexico, so we're small, but we're really trying to do everything we can to support. So
That's great. Well, to finish everything up, this podcast is called The Prepared School Psychologist. When you think of that term prepared, what do you do to help yourself feel more prepared in your role?
I try to always keep myself like within what's going on currently in the profession, whether that's going to NAS, going to my own training, reading up. I'm never, so being that I'm a step removed now, I never want to have that separation
Yeah.
from what's happening currently in the schools. And that's one thing I like about leadership as well, is I'm always talking to people through these networking sessions, through these other things. I'm knowing what is impacting the schools right now.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that mean for me as a leader, as a trainer, as somebody who might jump out there and do work when I can. I feel like I'm always, like we said, we never fully know we never have this all figured out. So
Right.
I think our role is lifelong learning. So even in this position, it is, oh, this is something I don't know very well yet, or this is something that has changed over the years. I don't never want to be one of those professors who this is like, oh, well, everything you're saying about what we should be doing, that's all outdated.
Right.
So I am always trying to figure out what is happening on the field. And so much of that is conversation. It's the formal training, but it is the getting out there and talking to my students, to my supervisors, to my members. What is happening? What is the most important thing going on in the schools right now? Because I feel like that is always changing. And I have to keep up. So that can look like many things, formal, informal, but you have to be prepared for whatever's coming. And we don't always know what's coming.
Right.
But at least we see what the trends are. I've been in this field long enough to where I know where the trends are.
Exactly.
And keeping as much up with those as I can, so that I'm always going to be like the best I can at what I do. And if my knowledge is like, oh, I did this work 5-6 years ago, and I don't really know what's happening anymore because I'm in my office all day, then I'm not gonna be effective, and I'm not gonna meet the needs of, just as I said, just my students or my members, if I don't, as a leader, don't know what's happening.
Exactly.
So I'm always trying to stay involved.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast and for spending some time with me today and sharing all of your knowledge. I know that I'm feeling inspired from our conversation. So thank you again for being here. And again, we will put in our show notes ways that if people are interested, whether they're currently in New Mexico or are thinking of moving to New Mexico, that they're able to get involved and make sure everyone's keeping up to date with that lifelong learning. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
We'll see you all later.
That sounds good.